to the channel. My name's Carissa, and this is Boxers and Books, where I talk about all things bookish and share with you my thoughts on books that I've read or am currently reading. So today I'm going to be doing the book recommendations tag. I'll link the creator of the tag down below with the original video. I just thought it would be fun to let you get to know my reading taste a little bit more, while also, kind of doing what I did for 9 years as a bookseller and recommend books, sell books, kind of, in a sense. Because that was my favorite part about working at Barnes & Noble, besides creating displays, was talking to people about books and getting to know what people like, getting introduced to new books, getting new recommendations, giving recommendations, all of that stuff. And it brought me no greater joy than when someone was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, and they got the book and then they came back and they were like, that book, and I'm like, I know. So the first question on this tag is a book that you tell people is your favorite. Now, prior to this month, my answer would have been Illuminae. I mean, I have a tattoo of it, for God's sake. You can't really see it, but it says Illuminae, and then it's got orange, yellow, and red in the background, like the book cover. It's supposed to be kind of explodey, like the book cover is. Because it was one of my favorite books. It was my first foray into mixed media. It hit me real hard when characters were dealt with. I'm trying not to spoil that book, though it's been out for, God, almost a decade, if not a whole decade. But anyway, it was my favorite book, and especially now that we've kind of all lived through the worst parts of COVID together, I think that it would hit differently now. If I was to read it again, given what happens in that book. It's in the premise that there's a disease that is spread to people on the ships, because it is a space opera. But anyway, that would have been my favorite book. But I recently read Blood Solace by Vila Roth, and yes, it might not be fair to say my favorite book is a sequel, because you can't really recommend that book. If it's the first in this series, you're like, yeah, it's the first in the series, blah, 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 it's so great, and people can start right there. But with it being a sequel, you have to read the first one before you can read the second one, otherwise it's not going to make sense. So it kind of sucks that my favorite book is a sequel, but I love that book. If you watched my last video, which was my Blood Solace non-spoilery review, I gushed about that book, talked about all the things I loved about it in depth. So it's pretty easy to say that that's not my favorite, even if it's not the most recommendable book, based on it being a sequel. The second question is a book that is your guilty pleasure. And I'm actually going to tie in this question with question 13, which was a book that you thought that you were going to hate, but you ended up liking. And, but my answer for this is actually a series. It's the Vancouver Wolves hockey series by Odette Stone. And I've kind of, talked about this to some people, because book 3 is a wild ride, and we'll get into that. But I originally wanted to read a hockey romance because I needed something to read, and I live in Vegas, and it was around the time that we just got the Golden Knights. And so I was like, hockey, yeah, let's read a hockey romance. And so I found this on KU, and the description was something, and I had to read it. The first book is called Puck Me Secretly. It's the only one that is a pun, now that I'm thinking about it. All the other books are not puns in the titles. but this one is. Anyway, so it was called Puck Me Secretly, and I'm just gonna let the description speak for itself. I'm gonna be looking over here so I can read it to you. I've never been in love. I've never had an orgasm, but I've faked plenty. I want to experience love, real, passionate love. I don't want to die. It's funny what blurts out of your mouth when the plane you're on is going down, and I don't hold back with my seatmate when my plane decided to crash. My hysterical confessions didn't faze the muscular stranger that sat beside me. In fact, he promised if we survived, he'd give me my first orgasm. We survived. I came. Jesus Christ. And then he left without telling me who he was. On the first day of my job, I stood in front of the Vancouver Wolves hockey team and called out a number 33. Imagine my shock when he skated forward. Max is an incredible hockey player whose wild, out-of-control antics have almost derailed his career. So many secrets shroud his past and continue to threaten his future. Now he's my secret, a secret that could ruin everything. Puck me secretly. Some secrets are too big to keep. It's been a while. I knew what the book was about, like, prior to recording this, because I read it. It's been a while since I read that. And you see why I had to read it, right? So, anyway, I read this book. I hated it. I finished it. Like, I wanted to DNF it, but I'm like, this book is so fucking bad. I gotta finish it, and I powered through it and just hated it. I think I rated it like 2 stars, and that was only because, like, it held my attention. So I finished the book. Don't tell me why I started reading the second book of the series. I found out there was more in the series, and I was like, F it. I'm just gonna read the whole series, because I need some entertainment in my life, even though my entertainment would be punishing me, by having to endure it. But anyway, I read the second book. I actually kind of like it. I like Ryan as a character. He's a teddy bear, which is like my type. So I actually really enjoyed the second one moderately more than the first one. And that one's called Home Game. And then the third book is kind of what sealed my fate as, like, okay, I'm not just hate reading this series anymore. Like, I'm legitimately reading this series and liking it. The third book is called The Penalty Box, and I will read the description to this one, but it does not do this book justice, so then I'll explain why. He's a professional hockey player that lives on the edge. I prefer to play by the rules. I'm the personal assistant at a sports agency that no one notices, unless they need coffee. I don't like sports, and I like professional athletes even less. I'm indifferent to the mostly male clientele, except for one. Micah the Savage Petrov. That's right, he's Russian. And when it comes to wild antics, Micah is the biggest offender of them all. He's reckless, wild, and carelessly charming. I'm mortified that I find him attractive, but it doesn't matter because the guy hasn't taken a second look at me. Not once in 2 years. Micah's career jeopardizing situation requires drastic measures to be taken to keep him in the game. He's got money, I've got debt, and my boss has a crazy idea. Which is how I found myself stepping up to save him from himself. But at what cost? How long can I keep fighting my attraction? What ghost from his past is he brawling with? All I know is that I need to defend my heart before this big defenseman steals it away. Can we win this game, or is it too late for either of us? Now, while this one is funny, it's not as funny as the other one. but it also does not do the book justice. This book took everything in the kitchen sink and threw it at the wall to see what would stick. You've got fake dating slash fake marriage. You've got I'm different than all the other girls, but I'm the only one. Or I'm different from all the other girls slash he doesn't really want to settle down except for with me because I'm different situation. You've got a mafia tie-in. You've got a true crime, like serial killer on the loose situation going on. So there's like thriller elements. Like it's just wild. And that's when I knew that I liked this series. And I started out hating it. The fourth book, arguably not that great. It's more of the same. But the third book, that's the sweet spot for me. Because it's just so freaking crazy. Anyway, it's a guilty pleasure, and it's a book that I thought that I would hate, but I actually ended up liking. And I definitely recommend you try the series, if not just for a laugh, because you'll laugh. So a book that everyone loved, but you didn't. Now, I don't know if everybody loved this book, per se, but it was definitely like a booktube darling in coming up to its release. Like, everybody was anticipating this book. I was anticipating this book. Like, this was an auto-buy author for me, and I don't know if she necessarily is anymore. But that book would be Gallant by V.E. Schwab. Now, like I said, was anticipating this release. I was so looking forward to it that I ordered the Waterstones version, which has this on the front. It's got nice sprayed edges, and then it's got some pretty cool end papers that I think are the same. Yeah. So I got that, but not only did I get the Waterstones version, I ordered the Illumicrate version because I was so determined that I would love this book. And this is stunning. Stunning. It's got black sprayed edges. It's got foiling on the front of the book. It's got cool black and white end papers that I think are also the same on both. No, they're the same. Kind of. Maybe. Anyway. I was determined that I would love this book because it's V.E. Schwab. I was sorely disappointed. It was such a letdown. It felt like holding in a sneeze. I wanted so badly for it to just lean into the creepy more, lean into the spooky, lean into the scary. And maybe that's because I'm used to reading adult now and not YA. That maybe for like a younger audience this would be creepy, but it just wasn't satisfying. And I wanted so badly to like it, but I've seen some people say that they've rated it like 4 or 5 stars, they like it, blah blah blah, and I wish I was one of them. I'm really happy for them. I wish I was one of them, but I still hold on to these editions because they are gorgeous. So number 4, a book that you read the fastest. Now, I'm a pretty slow reader. It takes me a while to get through books compared to some people that can like devour a 500, 600 page book in like 2 days or 1 day even. But every now and then I get a hair up my ass and I can speed through a book. But lately, I think the fastest I've read a book was Blood Solace, which is about 600 pages. It's like 578. And I read it in about 6 days. Or Rhapsodic, which is a little over 400 pages, and I read it in like two. Um, so those were probably the fastest that I've read a book. But usually it takes me a good like 2+ weeks to get through a book, unless it's like super thin. Like it's a novella. If it's a novella, I can get through it in like a day. But yeah. So a book that deserves more hype. Now, this author has hype on TikTok, at least from what I've seen, and that's Lucy Score. But the books that I've seen recommended from her seem awful. But this book from her is called Rock Bottom Girl. It's about a woman who's near 40s. I think she's like 38. And she returns back to her small town in Pennsylvania. And she lost her job. She doesn't have like any money really. She's single because she got dumped by her fiance. I think he was her fiance, or at least boyfriend. It just, life is not going for her. She's literally hit rock bottom. And so she moves back with her parents. Her mom gets her a job at the high school as a soccer coach for the girls and gym teacher at the school. And in doing so, she encounters the bad boy from her childhood, Jake, who has stayed in their little town and is a history teacher who loves Hamilton and is very much about making history accessible for everyone. So I love him, and I loved their dynamic. It was quite like we're gonna pick up where we left off kind of thing. Even though there's some miscommunication and mistrust and things like that are going on. But this book was really good. I can recognize that it has some problems, especially when she is looking down on her body, but when she starts running, it's good for her mental health, and she's also losing weight. But she doesn't start running to lose weight. She starts it to get in the habit of something and to bring her out of her funk. But it's not necessarily like I have to lose weight to be happy situation. I kind of wish that part wasn't even in there about her losing weight, because it was weird a little bit. But Jake seemed to like her even before she started running and losing weight, so it wasn't like he was like, ugh, and then suddenly was like, oh my god, or anything like that. But I haven't seen it talked about. I only found it because it was on a list of like soccer romances, because I was on my sports romance kick and was looking up soccer romances, and I found that one. A book that is becoming a movie or TV show is the next question, and I'm not sure if it's still going to happen, but Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Okay. This one I've heard the movie rights are optioned for, or were purchased, but I don't know if that's actually going to happen. I haven't heard anything, but if it is, I'm kind of excited if they do it right. I don't want them to like twist either of these characters into something they're not, because, and especially since Eli is like super duper religious, like very fundamentalist, like cult adjacent version of religious, I wouldn't want them to change that about him for the sake of appeasing the masses. So yeah. And then I don't want them to make Victor a hero, or even try to make Eli a hero. Like, they're not. They're bad people that sometimes do good things, or like, you know, can justify their actions. So this one I would love to see as a movie. If you have not read this book, it is about two guys that are at college together who become friends, and they both have near-death experiences, and from those near-death experiences they get superpowers, and it's basically a countdown as you read it to them meeting up. So it flashes back and forth between present time and past time, and it focuses on how they got there, and then also like how they became enemies, basically. So it's very good. Question that you 7 is a book that you've reread the most. I don't reread often, honestly. I want to do that more. But there's so many books that I want to read that I find myself not rereading because I keep plowing forward to the next book. But that would be The Little Prince. I have that one as a tattoo as well. He's staring at Valaris. Don't judge me. There's a reason for it. But anyway, it's one of my favorite books, aside from, you know, adult books. It's my favorite kids book, and I think that it is a book that everybody should read at some point in their life. Number 8, a book from a genre you don't typically read from. That would be The Island of Sea Women by Lisa See. And this is a historical fiction set in World War II time. But it's not your typical World War II. It focuses on Japan's occupation of Korea during that time, and specifically their occupation of Jeju, which is an island just off of South Korea, where these women they're called the Sea Women. They're the providers for their families. They go out and they scuba dive, or not even scuba dive. They have like just masks that are not hooked up to an oxygen tank or anything, just a mask. And they train their bodies to be able to go on these deep dives to collect sea clams and different things that they can eat and sell and things like that. It is an absolutely heartbreaking book, but it's really good if you like historical fiction. It's not a genre that I typically like to read, especially since a lot of it is World War II, World War I based. But it was really good, and I liked that it was a perspective that was not typically seen in historical fiction. Number 9, a book that deserves all the hype it gets, and for that one I said All Systems Red by Martha Wells. I think that this book is amazing. It definitely lives up to like apathetic robot with snark and sarcasm. Like, it's wonderful. So I think it deserves all the hype that it gets. Number 10, a book that you usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation. This is one that I would recommend all the time at Barnes, and that would be The Diviners by Libba Bray. I have the paperback of the first book and the second book, as well as the hardcover of the first book and the second book, that do not match the hardcovers of the third and fourth book. So I had to like mix my formats, which is something I normally wouldn't want to do, but it's fine. The other version kind of looks like a tarot card. This one has like a printed cape. I think that's my order slip that just fell out. It's got this printed case, which is pretty cool. But this is a paranormal, historical paranormal fantasy situation. Basically, it is about a girl who has the power to read objects. She can hold the object and like see something associated with that object, a moment in time. And she is sent from where she lives, I believe in the South, up to New York to live with her uncle um, who is very into the occult and supernatural and things like that. Um, because her parents are like, stop doing what you're doing, even though they're sending her to somebody who's like probably gonna foster what she's doing. Um, but it's a mystery series kind of, as well as being a fantasy. Um, in the at least in this first book, it kind of is for the others as well. Um, where you are Evie and her friends, some of which are also diviners, which means they have a power of sorts, are investigating the Naughty John. It's Naughty John. Murders that are happening that are supernatural based, that are happening around New York City, and Evie has to use her powers in order to help solve the case. Um, and it is genuinely a spooky book. Like, there are some scenes in here that like haunt me. This was everything I wish Gallant was in terms of the spook factor. Like, Libba Bray did not pull punches when she took a hook and hung somebody from it. Like, she did not pull punches. So this is what I wanted Gallant to be. But it's a fantastic book. We don't talk about the last book. I DNF'd to the last book. I've heard horrible things about it. The series is complete at book 3 as far as I'm concerned. I loved the first 3 books. The 4th one, I couldn't really care less about. Which sucks, because I kind of want to know what happens. I'll probably just have to look up a synopsis, because I'm not going to go back and read it. Am I going to get rid of it? No, because it completes my set. But a book that has your favorite characters. I already talked about this one, Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Victor is probably one of my favorite characters because of his morally gray nature. I also really liked the dog. I can't remember his name for the life of me at the moment. But he was a character all of himself in this book, and I loved him. And it was a joy reading that book because of how unhinged Victor is, while also thinking that he's like in the right, because all people that are, crazy think they're in the right. A book that you wish you could live in. This one was kind of hard, but I went with Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan, because it's a lot of drama. It's a lot of needless drama, but I would like to know what it's like to be that rich. Like, they're crazy stupid rich, where they could just sneeze into $100 bill and it would be nothing. So, like, I would like to know what that's like. So that's a book that I would choose to live in. A book that made you cry. This one is also a UK cover, but it's Hold Back the Stars by Katie Kahn. It is so good, and the ending is so interesting because it has basically 3 different endings, and you just have to kind of like choose which one you think is the real ending. So it was my first book that had that experience where the ending was not like concrete. It wasn't like, boom, this happened. It was like, no, this could happen, or this could happen, or this could happen. You decide. Basically what this is about is 2 people, Karis and Max, who are floating around in space, and they have 90 minutes of air left, and they have nothing. It says they have nothing to hold on to but each other. It says a world whose rules they couldn't submit to, a place where they never really belonged, a home they're determined to get back to because they've come too far to lose each other now. I really want to reread this one. I just said I don't reread books really, but I really do want to reread this one, because I remember it like really yanking at me, and I was like sitting there reading going, no. And then finally, a book that you wish you could read for the first time. That one would be This Is How You Lose the Time War. I have the Illumicrate special editions. They're the same book, it's just this is the red one with the blue bird, this is the blue one with the red bird. This is a science fiction series about two agents that are working on opposite sides of a time war, and they communicate to each other through letters that they disguise in different ways. And it starts out as just kind of like witty banter back and forth, like, ha ha ha, I'm doing this thing and undoing what you just did, na 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 na, and kind of like poking fun. And then it turns into much more as they fall in love, and it's so good. Some of the most romantic letters that I've ever read have come from this book. So I definitely recommend it if you like sci-fi and you like the epistolary, I think that's what it's called, format where everything's told in letters. It can be hard to follow through, like follow along with, because it is a very like formal, confusing read at times. But if you can get through it, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. That's the last question. So, those are my book recommendations. I know that I used some of the same books for questions, or I combined questions, so it's not a full 15 book recommendation list, but you got some really good recommendations hopefully out of this. What did you think of Puck Me Secretly? The description, and also if you were going down on a plane, what would your thoughts be? Would they be to the fact that you haven't had an orgasm, or would you be thinking other things? Let me know down below in the comments. Subscribe if you wanna, and like if you like the video. I'd appreciate it. I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.